Good day, nerds, and welcome to episode 49 of the Nerd Cantina Show. What we have today is a Cantina Conversation with Adam Dodge, and we'll get into his backstory here in a little bit, but the focus of this Cantina Conversation is deepfakes. Steve and I, we talked about this in a couple different episodes of the weekly show with these kind of hilarious deepfakes that are out there. And what we perceived at the time was a really dangerous kind of dark side of that technology. Well, Adam's here to tell us that it's not in the future. It has been happening, and many of us just aren't aware of it.
Yeah, we were really lucky to get somebody that not only has knowledge of the deepfake technology, but is also trying to combat it from a legal standpoint. So he also can look at it from the legal side on how we can protect ourselves and what can be done to try to legislate the deepfake. So it's not just the technology side that we'll be talking about today. It's also about the legalities of what these videos are. So for those that don't still know what a deepfake is, because that's one of the problems that we had talked about, deepfakes are where basically you can take any image, any video. I could take your head, put it on Schwarzenegger's body, and it is totally seamless. Barely can tell. And if you can't put the wheels of the motion of how this could be dangerous, we will definitely get into that in the episode.
And to be clear, a deepfake, it is anything that is deeply impersonating somebody, whether it's audio, video, or a combination of both. And if you go deepfake, look up deepfake on YouTube, and you're going to have no shortage. On YouTube, they're harmless and funny videos of people pretending to be different celebrities. There are comedians on YouTube that have channels that are you doing parodies, and then there's comedians who are using their own impersonations and putting celebrities' faces on theirs and laughing at it. Joe Rogan's highlighted some of these comedians on his podcast. So some of the technology is harmless and entertaining, and that's what you see on YouTube. And a lot of it is harmful and dangerous to democracy and to individuals. And we'll talk about that throughout this podcast. So stick around for the episode and have your eyes opened a little bit to the challenges of deepfakes, legislating it, and combating it.
Calling back all nerds. Nerds!
All right, nerds, and welcome to the next Cantina Conversation. And today we are honored to sit down and have a conversation with Adam Dodge. So Adam Dodge is a California-based attorney who is also the founder of EndTab, which stands for Ending Technology-Enabled Abuse. And he's really putting out some great resources and fighting against the emerging deepfake and the concerns that we have around society and some of the abuses that are happening on the individual level. And we're honored to have you. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I guess to get started, I'd like you to kind of just let us know where your path into law and then how you really became centered into championing this fight here in technology-enabled abuse and deepfakes specifically.
Sure. After law school, I elected to become a family law attorney because my dad was an attorney. My mom was a therapist. So I thought that would be the perfect, pun intended, marriage of those two disciplines. And it turned out to be a pretty much of a nightmare career choice for me. Litigating divorce and litigating families in the California court system is a pretty ugly experience to do day in and day out. But I'm grateful to it because it did expose me to domestic violence restraining orders and volunteering at domestic violence restraining order clinics. And it's something that I ended up being pretty passionate about, and ended up a few years after I stopped practicing family law, ended up working at a domestic violence nonprofit called Laura's House in Orange County in California, and getting to work with, work on thousands of domestic violence restraining order cases. And I did that for about 9 years. And in doing that work, you start to see patterns when you're doing that kind of work at scale, and you start looking at the numbers. And what I started to see was the ways in which technology was being weaponized and misused to perpetrate harm against primarily women online, and that we were really lacking in resources to do anything about it. And so I started working with professionals in the cybersecurity industry and InfoSec and the like to start to educate myself and also develop some practices and some interventions and screening procedures to actually address it when it came up. And one of the things that I started doing is I started looking at any new or emerging technology through the lens of how is this going to be misused or weaponized to harm the vulnerable victim populations that I work with. And that's really sort of true with any technology. If you look historically, any technology is that, and really, I mean, anything's technology, but when it gets introduced, it inevitably is used to harm and also tends to augment existing forms of abuse. So to give you an example, if you all have heard of revenge porn or non-consensual pornography, which we like to call it, that everybody knows about that now. And I don't know anybody that doesn't know what revenge porn is, for example, but it's not a new thing. It's only well understood and recognized because 1 in 25 online Americans who go online have experienced it or experienced threatened revenge porn. And the reason that is not because it's a new form of abuse. Revenge porn has existed since the advent of the photograph. As soon as you could take an intimate photo of somebody and share it, you could share it with people and without that individual's consent. And that's non-consensual pornography. Well, with the advent of the internet, smartphones, social media, it's just acted as an accelerant. And so now instead of taking, 40 years ago, I could have taken a Polaroid photo of my ex-girlfriend, naked, getting out of the shower and shared it with my buddies. And that the order of magnitude of the harm would be limited to the people I could physically show the photograph to. But now I can take my smartphone and film my naked girlfriend getting out of the shower and share it with the world in about 5 seconds. And that can never be, the magnitude of harm is not only measured by how many people can view it, but also by the fact that it can never be scrubbed from the internet. So that victim has to live the rest of their life knowing that photo or that video could show up in their social media feed, at their kid's school, at their work. So it really hangs over their head. And to this is sort of the long way to getting to answer your question about, and so when deepfakes came out, and I know we're probably going to get into more detail about this, but when deepfakes came out, I looked at that as sort of non-consensual pornography 2.0, and started thinking about the ways in which it wasn't just going to affect celebrities, but it was going to affect non-celebrities and victims of gender-based violence.
Yeah, when we first talked about it on our show, that was something that I instantly kind of went to, and my brother kind of didn't put those pieces of the puzzles together right away. You see all the funny deepfake videos, you see all, the harmless things that are done with it, but instantly knowing that we lived through the day of Photoshop, so in my college days, you'd see leaked celebrity nude photos, and it was just taking someone's head and putting it on a porn star's or some other nude body, and they'd leak it as, Alyssa Milano's leaked nudes and things like that. So instantly my brain went to, oh, Jesus, here we go. And, to talk to you and hear actually, it's actually worse than I had imagined. So I thought of deepfake as being a new technology. Maybe the malicious side of it hasn't caught up yet. From doing research on what you're doing, we're already behind the 8 ball on that, is what I'm taking.
Well said, sir. I agree. I think we're already lagging far behind. And to your point, and I think that's why public perception is a little misguided, is that a lot of folks will see these deepfakes that are intended to be humorous, and they're usually featuring men, putting Arnold Schwarzenegger's face on Bill Hader when he's doing a Schwarzenegger impersonation, and things like that. And that is the deepfake treatment that men get. They get superimposed into parodies or humorous videos. Women get superimposed or deepfaked or have face swapped into pornography without their consent. That makes up, of all the a report just came out last month from a deepfake detection company out of Europe called Deeptrace, and they provided a report to us that measured all the deepfake videos online and found that 96% of them were deepfake pornography. and 100% of those videos targeted women. None of them targeted men. So this is this is an incredibly gendered form of harm. But unfortunately, a lot of folks don't realize it, because when you see it, deepfakes mentioned in the news cycle, it's either A, for the humorous parodies. Oh, did you see this, Tom Cruise deepfake or something like that? Or it'll be, oh, this is going to affect the upcoming elections. Or, oh, this is going to affect the news cycle and magnify fake news. Seldom does it mention 96% of the problem, which is violence against women.
Admittedly, so that's where my head went when I was looking at potential, or when we first started talking about it, and a couple months ago when I seen my ever first deepfake video and had my eyes open to the technology that even existed. My initial thought was towards democracy, towards the election, and everything else. And like you said, the problem is it a threat to that? Absolutely, I'm sure it is. But the weight behind people debunking those and detecting those and making it known that it's fake, there's no lack of resources getting thrown at that. But for the ex-girlfriend who has nobody defending, her ability to prove that something's not fake, there's no help.
That's right, and nowhere is that better represented than in the way this has been legislated. So there are currently 4 deepfake bills that have been passed in the last 6 months. 2 of them focus on elections, which there has been no deepfake election fraud yet of any. I mean, you've got, you've got the video of Nancy Pelosi that got slowed down.
Yeah, that's the only one. That's the only one that's hit the news yet so far.
Yeah, and that's really a shallow fake. I mean, all they did was slow it down from 100% to 75%, and they didn't superimpose her face or anything like that. But so you have you've got 2 laws that deal with elections and 2 laws that deal with non-consensual deepfake pornography. So what you have, if you just from a statistical standpoint, you basically have 50% of the laws don't address 96% of the problem. And that just really underscores how we value violence against women versus potential or future harm to politicians who are decidedly male.
So now you said there's an organization that is actively tracking these videos. Is it something that's easily tracked? I mean, as they build these algorithms that scan videos online, is there code in the video that is easily read by AI or computer tech that can instantly detect deepfakes? Or is this just something that, individuals are having to figure out on their own?
I think it was probably a combination of both. The report, there are 4 major deepfake pornography, basically websites that are devoted to deepfake pornography. And so they basically counted the number of videos and were able to measure the number of views each video had. And then they also went to YouTube, where there's a lot of deepfake content, but that is where on YouTube, that's where you're going to find a lot of these comedic and safe for work parody videos featuring men. You're not going to find a ton of deepfake porn on YouTube, but on these dedicated and these deepfake pornography websites, they have really created a niche for themselves. They're pornography, under the umbrella of pornography, there's all sorts of niche types of pornography, and deepfake pornography has now firmly established itself in sort of pornographic canon on the internet, because they're getting, according to the report, these videos on the 4 sites had 134 million views and counting. And the number of deepfake videos that exist on the internet have doubled in the last 9 months. So the appetite for viewing these pornographic, non-consensual pornographic deepfakes is high and growing and growing.
Well, one thing on the detection side, I know that there is some efforts out there to develop the technology to detect. I think it was last month that Facebook announced their deepfake detection challenge, where they're encouraging individuals and going to reward people who can come up with algorithms and systems that can detect in real time deepfakes. But isn't part of the problem with the technology is if you can create an algorithm, an AI tool that can detect the deepfakes, it's really an arms race, because those same flaws that are detected are also going to teach the AI or the algorithms that are creating the deepfakes on how to improve themselves. And it's going to constantly be this iteration of improving in order to defeat the detection.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So the sort of the ironic thing about what makes deepfakes so powerful is the exact reason, or so interesting is the exact reason why they're pretty much impossible to detect. And that is where you get into machine learning, because basically deepfakes are created through a generative adversarial network, or a GAN. And the way that works is you have basically two neural networks, or two artificial intelligence minds, right? And the first one is developing the fake, and let's call that the creator. And then the second mind is the discriminator, or the detector. And it is examining each fake and finding its flaws. And then instead of that just being the end of it, then it feeds that information back to the generative neural network, who then fixes those flaws and then repeats the process. And now this is happening at superhuman speeds until you end up with a deepfake video that is flawless. So to your point, what's going to happen, basically an extension of that process is going to happen, or the concern is an extension of that process is going to happen when we're trying to use technology to detect deepfakes, because if they're using AI and neural networks to detect deepfakes, but then the generative mind that created is just going to use whatever data it finds as to the flaws that allowed itself to be detected
in the first place.
Isn't going to incorporate them and then eliminate them. And we've already seen that happen with deepfakes that and they initially didn't blink, and so they figured out how to catch deepfakes, but then they just absorbed that input and fixed it. Or the blood vessels, the
micro pulses that are like in the temple, and now they're starting to mimic that.
Yep, exactly right.
So originally, part of my curiosity is where did this technology originate from, and what was it used for? So we have, movies now where they're taking an old Michael Douglas and making him a young Michael Douglas in Ant-Man. You have dead characters in like General Tarkin, who was in Rogue One, and it looked seamless. We have Leia being recreated for the next Star Wars movie. Was this kind of like the original intent, or was deepfake kind of just birthed to have fun with like that face swap app and things like that?
I think it's the latter. I don't think it was created as a special effects tool. It's built on TensorFlow, which is it's created by Google, which is a open source AI platform. And the name Deepfakes comes from the person on Reddit who started a forum announcing that he had used TensorFlow to create this face swapping platform that was initially used to create pornography. So there was no, I think it's the reverse of what you just described, which is it was initially used for porn, and now they're sort of backing into how can we use this for, in movies and in TV to bring people back to life, or, edit film and that sort of stuff.
But it was I imagine pretty rough at the beginning, and Hollywood has improved it, but it was so difficult and costly that it just, having quality ones didn't exist. But how accessible is this technology today to an average person who just wants to create their own deepfake?
Yeah, it's getting better. It still requires some computing power and some savvy. So if you wanted to commit yourself to developing the skill set to do it, you can. So there's a open source app called Fake App, which you can download. It's not even an app; it's just software, but you can download it and you can utilize. And it uses powered by artificial intelligence, and it would allow really any lay person who wants to commit themselves to a little bit of time to basically create their own fakes, which would require them to have a a good amount of photos or video footage of the person's face that they want to target, and then a source video, usually pornographic, that with a individual whose body approximates that of the person they're looking to fake, so that it appears. Because if you put, I mean, for example, that Bill Hader example I gave you, he was getting interviewed on Conan, and he started doing a Schwarzenegger impersonation. So somebody made a deep fake by putting Schwarzenegger's face on his body. But, Bill Hader does not look like a 70-year-old former Austrian former Mr. Universe. He's a really thin guy. So you could obviously tell that it wasn't him. But when you put somebody's face onto the body of somebody who actually has a similar body type, then you've got a really good platform to create a pretty believable fake.
So is this able to be reeled back at all, or are we moving to a point in society where we're just going to have to accept this technology and regulate it? Do you see us ever being able to put up a wall against this technology?
No, you can't. We can't unring this bell. I mean, to give you an example, last month or the month before, there was an app that came out on the App Store in China called Zao, ZAO.
Yeah.
And it moved to number one on the App Store in China, which is saying something when you consider China's population size. Mm-hmm. And it was a deep fake. It was a deep fake app that, with one photo, fake app used to require hundreds and hundreds of photos. This app required one photo to deep fake you into pre-selected clips from television, like Game of Thrones, or movies. And it is very, very sharp. And
yeah, we discussed that. And even on the audio side, in the last week, there was an announcement that they can come up with pretty quality audio ends of that deepfake with as little as 5 seconds of audio from an individual. Obviously, if they get more points, it's going to be even more reliable and mimic that person better. But with as little as 5 seconds audio, which isn't hard to get, especially by public figures, that now also brings greater kind of, I guess, credibility, or harder to detect that it's a fake if it's truly somebody's voice to go along with that image.
Yeah, and voice cloning, I mean, that is really taken off. So voice cloning, I mean, there is commercial voice cloning happening out there where you can go to these websites and get, that are above board, that can, I think they require more than 5 seconds, but we're getting to your point. What you're describing is exactly what we're seeing. Is this technology is doing two things. It's becoming more accessible. It's doing three things. It's becoming better. It's producing better fakes. It's becoming more accessible to non-technical people, and it needs less and less data to create the fake. I mean, those are sort of the three things that are happening right now. And we're seeing that with video, we're seeing that with audio, and we're seeing it beyond deepfakes. You have deep portraits where you can just hijack somebody's face. So there's a variety, which is sort of a step beyond deepfakes, where you can actually, it's almost like putting on the mission, like from Mission Impossible. It's like putting on a mask of somebody else's face, and then on camera, and then their face will do whatever your face does, which is, I think, where this is going to go. Because I think deepfakes, you're limited in the sense that, okay, well, I can, in the case of pornography, for example, I'm limited by whatever the person in the video that I'm using as for my deepfake content. I'm limited to whatever that person is doing. But with a deep portrait, I can make my ex-girlfriend do whatever I want on camera. So it just gives you more power and control over that person.
So this is what really kind of scares the hell out of me, is that, we are already in the age of fake news, right? So people are already skeptical about what they read and what they hear from each other. Now we're taking that, and we can't even trust our eyes at this point now. What can we do as a society to try to mitigate this at some point? Like you said, that the tools are getting into everybody's hands, and they're only getting better. So you're going to have a large portion of the population that aren't trying to do nefarious things with these things. They just want to, I just want to put my face on my dog and be my dog for a day. Ha 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 ha. But we are going to have a small portion of the population that are looking to subvert democracy, that are looking to, like you said, revenge porn or just profit on pornography in these nefarious ways. Are there laws that we can pass that
would be effective?
Yeah, be effective in at least trying to. I don't think you're ever going to be able to stop this anymore. We're only going to be able to police it at this point.
Well, the problem is this. So a lot of people, when I give these, I do a lot of trainings and presentations on deepfakes to law enforcement and judicial officers and the like. And the question I almost always get is, well, isn't this illegal? Like, these deepfake pornography sites. I mean, how are they able to post all this content of all these celebrities, making it appear that they're participating in these pornographic videos? And the answer is, the answer or the issue is Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which says that it basically immunizes any tech platform from being sued or legally responsible for the content that people post on their sites. So to give you an example, if somebody were to create a fake profile of you on Facebook and posted all this hate speech and threatened people and did all these things, and Facebook just left it up there, and you ended up losing your job, you ended up suffering, emotional distress, it ruined your relationships, and you were reporting it to Facebook, and Facebook just didn't take it down. You can't sue Facebook for that. Facebook is under no obligation, has no liability when it comes to things that people are doing on its platform. You could sue the person who created the fake profile, but you can't sue Facebook. So the problem is, with deepfake pornography is, it's very difficult to find out who's posting it, and you can't go after the platform, which is the entity you know about. So it creates a really uneven playing field for victims.
Well, are we currently setting precedent right now with the way people are trying to go after gun companies? We recently just had a case where I think the Sandy Hook victims are granted permission to go after gun manufacturers. If that precedent is set, wouldn't that be the same avenue we would pursue to go after deepfakers?
Well, I think what have to happen is it's not going to be a court-driven process. It's going to be a legislative one, because there was a case out of New York where you had, and this is not about deepfakes, but it goes to the power of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which was, long story short, a guy was on a gay men's dating app and met somebody. I was on Grindr. Met a guy, they dated a couple times, and then he ended the relationship. And this guy, the perpetrator, ended up going on Grindr and creating fake profiles of the victim and sending men to his home and work with requests to enact rape fantasies on him. And over 1,000 men came to this guy's house and place of work. And Grindr not only did Grindr refuse to take it down and ignore requests and cease and desist letters from this victim's attorney, they ignored a federal restraining order that they were obtained, ordering them to take it down. They filed a lawsuit against them in New York. It was thrown out. They appealed. That was thrown out. And the Supreme Court declined to take the case. So, and what the judges said is, look, I think this is terrible, but the courts are not the place to deal with this. You need to go and deal with the legislation. And so that's what's going to happen. But the people on the other side who want to oppose that are the most powerful companies in the world. You have Google.
They're like countries.
They are.
I mean, they're pretty much countries. Yeah.
With no landmass. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So when Google and Apple and Facebook are combining forces to stop you from doing something, it makes it almost an impossibility to get anything done.
So sticking with the court avenue, before we change subjects, where does defamation fall into this? If you're taking my likeness and making me do, crazy things, doesn't that fall under kind of like defamation law?
Yeah. So the existing laws that are available, and that would be a civil. So the answer is yes. It would be interesting to see how that plays out in court. But I tend to look at, okay, what laws, and I'm usually looking at criminal laws. Defamation would be a civil law, but I'm usually looking at criminal laws. What laws are on the books right now that we could sort of shoehorn a deepfake abuse case into? And you have things like credible impersonation or false impersonation, extortion, harassment, domestic violence, stalking, things like that. And then on the civil side, yeah, you could argue that, you've been defamed. You could argue, and then the law, the deepfake pornography law that got passed in California this year is specifically designed to give really actors or actresses legal standing to sue somebody for making a deepfake pornographic video of them without their consent. So,
well, correct me if I'm wrong. We've used civil court to subvert criminal justice in some cases. I mean, you have murder cases where they couldn't necessarily prove the murder, but they were able to sue the murderer in civil court and win a settlement in court. You have rare but sometimes often cases where what you need to prove in civil court isn't as extensive as the criminal route. So could that be an avenue that essentially helps subvert this? I mean, you sue someone for enough money, it's gonna put a damper in their in their plans.
Yeah. So I've dealt with this kind of issue a lot because, for example, in California, you can sue somebody civilly for domestic violence. There's tort law for it, but it rarely happens because, first of all, civil litigation, unless you have somebody taking it on contingency or pro bono, is expensive and it takes years, right? So it's a pretty laborious process. But two, the person on the other side has to have assets or money to make it worthwhile. If you're suing some 19-year-old kid who lives in his mom's basement, you can get a $10 million judgment against that person, but he's never going to be able to pay it. And so no lawyer, unless it's, a university or a school or somebody with a hefty, has money, has assets, or has an insurance policy, it's not fun.
Well, I'm sure sites like Pornhub and some of these deepfake sites with 130 million views, they have to be taking in some kind of revenue. I mean, or else why would they put themselves out there for... Right.
But you can't sue them because of Section 230 of the CDA. So they're immunized. So you would have to go after the person who's posting it. And if they don't have money, no lawyer is going to take that case. And so you're stuck with, as a victim, you either, if you're a celebrity, you can use this new law and go after somebody, and they may just do it because they have the money and they don't care about getting any kind of a financial gain from a settlement or from a victory in court. But for most folks that are non-celebrities, they don't have the money or the resources or that luxury to do that. So they're just not going to pursue it.
And it makes sense because then, the civil court puts all the onus on really the victim to go out and identify the individual who's at fault, prove that it's at their fault, and then burden all that cost. You talk about, the better route is on the criminal side. Is there examples of the criminal side? What I'm thinking of is, there's plenty of extortion campaigns and stuff where people are grabbing pictures from you off your webcams or whatever else and threatening to release that if you don't pay them money. Are the people who are creating maybe deepfakes and threatening, a school teacher and saying, hey, I'm going to send this to all your kids' parents if you don't pay me $5,000 to not release this deepfake? Is there any extortion or like criminal activity that's tied to this yet?
We're not seeing it in that sense too much yet. Usually they just release it. They're not threatening to do it. They're just doing it. The only place where we're seeing a lot of sort of deep crime or deep fake related crime is financial crime against companies and corporations where they're cloning the voices of CEOs or C-level executives and then getting lower level or lower tier employees to wire money to accounts.
Right. We talked about that with that case from Hungary, where I think it was like a little over $200,000 that was wired because the CEO's voice was deep faked.
And we had a friend on last week who's a ethical hacker, and he had talked about how humans are the weakest links in a lot of these internet security chains. So if you could deepfake your boss's voice and just have him ask you what your password is because he needs to do this bank transfer, I mean that's just another form of hacking.
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing is they say, so like when staff are getting trained by like cybersecurity specialists, if they get a email that seems weird or is asking them to wire money, they're supposed to confirm it by calling the person, right? So they need to update that standard, because now calling somebody isn't going to be enough. You need to either and really even a video call, if they want to create a deepfake of that person, isn't going to be enough. I mean, it's almost, you either have to have some encryption level communication platform, which you could use like Signal or something like that, or you need to go see the person, that individual in person. I mean, that's kind of where we're getting.
Well, one of the problems I'm seeing right now from this conversation brings us to something that we talk about on the show often, is these companies like Facebook, you call it YouPorn or Pornhub, and all these websites. When it's beneficial to them, they want to be a provider. Look, we're just putting our tech out there. People load up the videos. We don't know what's going on. Like, we have nothing to do with it. Can't sue us. But if you're doing things that they can't monetize, or if it's, part of their social justice agenda, that's when they'll come in and play the police and say, well, no, we're going to ban you from our platform because we feel this. They do this platform provider dance often. Is this where legislation would, they talk about it all the time in the elections now, is they're going to have to figure this out. If we get this figured out, do you see that helping this problem?
I want to make sure I understand your question. So do I see legislation of tech platforms helping the problem?
Yeah. So that they either have to be one or the other. So either you're just a platform that everybody could put whatever they want on, or you're a provider who can regulate itself and regulate who comes and goes on your network. You can't play both. You can't take the immunity from the law, but then also be your own. You have your own, set of standards and decide who gets to use it and who doesn't. It's kind of the one or the other.
Right. Yeah. I think our best hope is an amendment. Look, I am under no, and people that are a lot smarter than I am are under sort of no illusion that we're going to just wipe out Section 230 of the CDA. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to need an amendment to that, which basically puts some sort of reasonable standard in place that if these platforms follow it, so like, hey, Facebook, like, because right now they don't have to do anything. If somebody creates a fake profile of you on Twitter, Twitter they'll take it down, but they don't have to take it down. So, which is insane when you think about it. So what you really need is sort of a set of standards, objectively, what a objectively reasonable company would do in that circumstance, which is you have to have protocols in place that you take these things down quickly. You're scanning for, exploitative, child sexual image content or non-consensual pornography, and you just have to meet minimum standards. And as long as you do that, then you're not going to get sued. But if you fall out of balance with that, if you are operating below the standard, as in the Grindr example I gave you, then all bets are off, and people can come after you, which, I think that's a really reasonable approach, but they are going to fight that tooth and nail.
We had talked last week about a podcast we have both listened to with Ajit Pai, the head of the FCC, and one thing he was saying is the problem is that we're trying to use like 1940s telephone law to regulate modern internet providers and things like that, and it's essentially like trying to take a square peg and put it through a triangle hole. So do you see just amending a law being a fix, or do we really need to start from the ground floor and really analyze how we want these things to work for our society?
Yeah, I think a ground up approach would be great. I just don't think it's realistic. Like I just don't think we're going to see tech companies or the legislators who are supported by those tech companies come on board with something like that. But I totally agree. I mean, it really, what you just said really highlights sort of the inherent tension with technology and legislation, right? Like legislation moves at a glacial pace and technology moves at light speed. So you're never, by the time we spent years trying to bang out a new law, we're going to have a whole nother set of circumstances that were not contemplated when we developed that. I mean, some of the thing, to give you an example about something that I think about a lot is VR, right? When we get to a point where VR is pretty mainstream and very adopted, what do we do? And this is something that I think we should be thinking about now, or that law enforcement should be thinking about now. But what happens, let's say, if I go into VR with my girlfriend, and VR is designed to simulate presence, right? So what you experience in VR, you experience in your real life. And let's say we go into VR together and I assault her in VR, and it is traumatic for her. She suffers post-traumatic stress because VR is so good and it simulates presence that she actually suffers harm. And we come out of VR and she goes to law enforcement and tries to report this as a crime. I mean, what do you think law enforcement is going to do with that?
Well, yeah, devil's advocate, Barney Fife is just going to say, well, why didn't you take the headset off?
Yeah, they're going to victim blame, that's victim blaming. It's like putting the blame on the victim. Why didn't you change your number? Why didn't you not wear a dress that was so low cut? Why didn't you take the VR headset off? Which is just drives me nuts, because it should be why, and I don't think you're wrong, by the way. I think that there will be victim blaming that happens here. But the question should be, why did this person do this to you? Not why didn't you take the headset off? So they're going to say, wait, you got harmed in a video game and you want us to write that up as assault? Or another example is, if I have a restraining order against my ex-girlfriend and I go into VR and she's supposed to stay 100 yards away from me, how do I measure that in VR? How do I enforce a restraining order in VR if she's using an avatar that doesn't have her name? It's just, these are the things that we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, we're far from prepared to handle to handle that environment at all. Yeah, those are going to be tricky problems, and like you said, we'll deal with real consequences and real victims for years before it even becomes really a conversation that politicians or legislators can stomach.
That's really just frustrates the hell out of me, because what I'm describing in that VR scenario is going to happen. So this is not like, we know it's going to happen. So the strategy or the position of wait, like as you just described, waiting until we reach a tipping point where somebody famous is harmed that way, or enough people are harmed, there's enough victims, enough bodies piling up that people start to care about it. That is an insane strategy to me. When we can actually predict what's going to happen, there's no reason why we shouldn't proactively legislate it, like we are with elections and deepfakes. There's no deepfake election fraud happening in California right now, but we have a law for it. But we just got a law for deepfake pornography at the same time, and that actually is an issue. So we know we can do it when the legislators are properly motivated. They just don't tend to be properly motivated when it comes to gender-based violence against low-income or marginalized groups.
Yeah. Well, what I'd like to provide you some time is, as we're kind of coming to the end of our time here, is, I think we've done a good job, or you've done a good job painting the real threat here and what concerns we should all have. What is the way forward? You've got your organization, EndTab. What are you attempting to do? What do you see as going to be the realistic change that is going to take place in the next couple of years that people can get behind, individuals can start to support, and hopefully see some change in the near future?
Right. So for me, level one is education. Most of my presentations, when I talk, let's say, about deepfakes, folks, I would say 5% of the room, 95% of the room has never heard of a deepfake before.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I told people we were interviewing you for deepfakes, and I had a ton of individuals who consider themselves rather techie asked me what a deepfake is.
Yeah,
didn't know why we were having this conversation in the first place.
Yeah, so that's been my experience. But the people in the room that I'm speaking to are law enforcement. They are, court staff. They are first responders. They are victim service providers. The people that victims of this kind of tech-enabled abuse are going to go to first when it happens. And if somebody reports, let's say, hey, there's this video of me in a pornographic video, that's not me, and the person doesn't believe them because they don't know the technology exists yet to do this, they're going to re-traumatize that victim, and they're going to cause that victim to lose faith in the system. So for me, I'm just jamming on trying to educate those in power and those on front lines about not just deepfakes, but just technology enabled abuse in general. And it's not complicated stuff a lot of the time. So I think education is one. And then I think tech platform responsibility is another. Historically, tech platforms that are building these technologies, they don't. A couple things. One, they prioritize growth over safety. That's been from the get-go. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they prioritize growth over safety. They weren't thinking about how their platforms could be misused to do harm or be used as a playground for people to harm others. And then two, there is no, a lot of the deepfake tech and a lot of the voice cloning tech is coming out of universities. And they've been very clear that when they develop this stuff, that they're not taking into account safety. They're saying, oh, well, this isn't intended to be used to deceive somebody. Our intentions are that this is used for, film dubbing or something like that. And, people should, if they're going to use it, they should note on it that it's fake, but we're not going to do anything about that. And that drives me nuts because it creates the standard. I mean, we are in a digital age, right? And but to give you a separate example, if I was a virologist and I came up with a super bug that from a scientific standpoint is fascinating and groundbreaking and is going to win me a bunch of awards because the science behind it is so incredible, I couldn't take that virus or that super bug and then just share it with the world and say, hey, look at this awesome thing I created. Like legally, I cannot do that. And morally, I shouldn't do it. But with technology, I can create a technological superbug, and I can release it to anybody I want. I can open source it, and nothing's going to happen to me.
And who regulates those laws? That's a very good analogy. The medical, So if I create a new virus using the old Black Plague virus, I don't just get to walk out in the street with it. There is already laws on the books that prevents these things from happening?
Yeah. I mean, the FDA is not going to let that slide. You can't. I mean, if you could do it illegally, but there are laws against that. But with technology, there aren't any.
Well, I'm just thinking, so we already have a framework if we wanted to just, take out virus, put in, code, take out, just reword a already kind of set law and just kind of conform it to deal with tech rather than medical issues.
Totally. I think that would be a really interesting idea. I think you are going to draw the full weight of every tech company in the world coming out against that.
Because
they're going to say
it will stifle some innovation. Like it will absolutely stifle innovation. There's no doubt that it would. It's just a matter of
should this innovation be stifled?
Just like in the medical industry is stifled by rigid standards of testing and production. It is stifled. It's slowed down, but it's for the benefit of
humanity,
of public health. I guess you'd have to be able to convince the tech industry and convince just general people that it's worth it.
So is there anything that an individual can do? So, the moms all say, well, if you don't want your naked pictures online, don't take naked pictures. Well, now we're at the day where I don't need your naked picture. I just need your profile picture from Facebook and someone else's naked picture. And now, boom, here you go. Is there really anything an individual can do to protect themselves from this?
Preventatively, not really. I mean, I think we're going to get to there are a few things you could do now. I mean, but it's our faces are everywhere on social media and on the internet. So it's almost impossible, because if they have photos of your face, then they can create a fake of you. So it's really about not preventing this from happening, because to exactly what you said, you don't need a sex tape anymore. You just need a photo of that person's face. And so I don't think you can really prevent. So then it's about sort of the different things we can do in response that exist now. Google will de-index non-consensual deepfake pornography from its search results. You can seek to have these things taken down from all the big social media platforms and tech platforms. And
like you said, once the damage is done, the damage is done.
Yeah. I mean, it's you're just trying to do damage control at that point. But I think the real thing that would have a chilling effect on people doing this is if we could quickly get to the perpetrators and hold them accountable. Because right now, I mean, Google and MrDeepfakes.com and Facebook, they're not going to give up anybody. They're not going to say, oh yeah, the person behind this account is X, go get them. They're not going to do that. It's incredibly difficult. The anonymity that's provided to these perpetrators by creating fake profiles of fake accounts online is almost impenetrable.
There's no warrant that can be issued to get that information.
So there is if you found a law enforcement agency that was willing to investigate it and a DA that was willing to charge on it, then you can issue subpoenas to the internet service providers to find out who's behind these accounts. It gets harder from there though, because then even if I can track you down to your desktop or your laptop, I've also got to prove you were behind. It wasn't somebody else on that computer when this was going on, and it was actually you. But the resources and the time invested that people would have to invest to do that is not inconsiderable. And so what you have is it's not happening. I get calls from people all the time. Hey, I'm being harassed by somebody. I know who it is, but I can't prove it because they're using these fake accounts. And law enforcement is not doing anything. Yeah,
it's like when your ex-girlfriend slashes your tires. Unless you got her on video doing it, you're still kind of assed out.
Yeah, when it comes to the court, when it comes to the court system, that's true. So, but law enforcement could take that case up. They could issue subpoenas and get the person's phone. They could go after the perpetrator and get a search warrant for the perpetrator's phone. They could serve subpoenas on the ISP. Internet service providers and do all that. But unless the abuse is insane, law enforcement isn't going to commit those resources because either they don't have them or they don't have the bandwidth, or that they're just not prioritizing it because it's a $0 crime, right? This isn't your local bank saying, hey, we're victims of cybercrime and they extorted $500,000 from us using ransomware. This is a 18-year-old, college freshman who is being stalked and harassed online, but there's no financial loss there. So it's a $0 crime, which is really frustrating. So I'm a big proponent of cutting through this layer of anonymity that is provided to these people doing harm, and saying, look, have an understanding that, look, Facebook has terms and conditions. If you start harassing or bullying or threatening people on their platform, they are going to give you up in a heartbeat because you're violating their terms and conditions. But that right now, there's no chance of that happening.
And that's just the major ones. It's not going to stop like you said, the actual sites that just want to have deepfake porn. They're never going to give up their guys. They're their content providers are the reason why they're making money. Why would they cut off their revenue stream?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I will say, I can't remember which one of you mentioned it, but you talked about Facebook's jump into the deepfake. They call it their
detection challenge.
Yeah, their deepfake detection challenge. So here's what gets me about that. This is like culmination of all my frustration when it comes to this. Is we know that 96% of deepfakes are non-consensual deepfake pornography targeting women. That is the issue, right? So Facebook says, hey, we're going to come out and we're going to create all these deepfakes so that you and the detection community can use it to detect deepfakes. So everybody's focused on detection as the solution to deepfakes, because that will help politicians and that will help the news media. But that will not help women and not who are targeted with non-consensual deepfake.
Yeah, because no one can post porn on Facebook anyways. So that's not where it's going.
Well, no, it's actually because no one cares. Everybody knows that deepfake, the deepfake pornography is fake, and they don't care. Mr. Deepfakes, it's in the name. So that detection, you could come up with a solution to detecting deepfakes tomorrow instantly, and Mr. Deepfakes is going to keep right on trucking, hugely popular and growing in numbers. And it's still harmful, right? So yes, if a deepfake porn video is believed, it has the effect of revenge porn or non-consensual pornography. But even if that video is debunked, the victim is still being sexualized and harassed and fetishized online and humiliated online and all these different things. If a 16-year-old girl is walking down the hall at her school and she sees a group of guys all watching a video, and she walks up and she sees it's a violently sexual deepfake of her participating, and she walks away. She knows it's fake. All the guys know that it's fake. Do you think that she's not going to suffer any kind of harm or be impacted by that video simply because they know it's not real?
Yeah, no.
So that leaves 90, and that's 96% of the problem. So detection is not the answer. It's partially the answer, but it's not. It does not eliminate the harm for 96% of the problem, which frustrates the hell out of me.
Well, it scares the hell out of us.
Yeah, it scares the bejesus out of me ever since I got a hold of this technology. Both of us have daughters. Yeah.
Both of us have young daughters, and I can only imagine where that technology is going to be, 10 years from now when my daughter's in high school.
Yeah, and I was a bouncer at a nightclub for 10 years, and one thing I do know, and that you just confirmed, is humans are fucking savages. They're savages, and you are always going to have that group of disgusting humans that don't care about anything or anybody but whatever their agenda is. And yeah, this you didn't make me feel any better today, bud.
Well, when I give these presentations, I always have to do a disclaimer to say, look, you're going to be freaked out by this presentation, but it's necessary because we need to know what's going on so we can prepare for it and start, be in a position to help people when they come to us in need, be able to look at all audio and visual media with a more critical eye so that we don't just believe everything we see or hear, and be able to lobby, our local legislators or our state legislators or our federal legislators, and put some pressure on to try to litigate.
And part of it is on society to care about this. I mean, a part of it is having society recognize that maybe we shouldn't enjoy this technology as much. Maybe we should all, if you see a deep fake, call it out. See something, say something. Yeah. There's just a whole mess of this is, I don't know, man. I don't even know. I will say I'm glad that we were able to meet and have this conversation, because it does make me feel a little bit better that I know of at least one person now that cares enough to try to take action and try to get these laws passed and talk to law enforcement and, be the advocate for the victims of these videos, because as we said, not a lot of people know they even exist. And we need to get to a point where we have awareness and we can take it from there.
Well said, sir. Well said.
Well, Adam, we thank you for your time today, and really appreciate the conversation. Hopefully we're in the same vein of what you're trying to do with EndTab, which it does start with education. It starts with making this kind of a norm that society at least understands that this is a problem, and then hopefully that inspires change over time. So I appreciate you educating us and educating our audience today.
Absolutely. It was a blast. Thanks for having me. I geek out on this stuff. And so I really appreciate you shining a light on it. It means that's extremely important to the work that we're all doing. So I really appreciate both of you doing that.
All right, nerds. And thanks for listening to this Cantina Conversation with Adam Dodge. If prior to this episode, you didn't know anything about deepfakes, well, now you know a bit about the technology, and go ahead and enjoy looking through YouTube and some of the funnier ones of this deepfake technology, that kind of harmless side. And even if you did know about deepfakes, hopefully you learned a bit about really the challenges of legislating this, the challenges of combating this, and the real ways that this technology is being used to exploit and harm individuals today. Again, a big part of what we try to do in this podcast is just have conversations, open up conversations, maybe open up a few people's eyes and really just make it a part of general conversation. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Let us know what you thought at thenerdcantina.com/community. We'd love to get your opinions on this topic, as well as drop us a line and let us know what topics you think deserve a conversation. We'll go ahead and see if we can find a guest that'll fit that. And I'm also going to ask that if you have the ability to, we'd appreciate if you would consider becoming a patron of the Nerd Cantina show and finding us over at patreon.com/the Nerd Cantina, and consider contributing as little as $1 towards the show. All support is incredibly appreciated and really enables us to contribute more into this podcast, spend a few dollars on marketing and getting our name out there, which will help us to get even more guests, have in-depth conversations with other experts in their field, and gain some credibility here for the show. As always, we appreciate you listening, and we'll talk to you again soon, nerds.